Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Libhart and you're watching Vision Plus. What you see today on this show may someday save your life. We have a testimony of salvation, I think that's what I'm going to call it. And the man is here from Washington, D.C., via Atlanta, Gatlinburg, and a few other places in the world. And here is a person, Ben Rowland, that you're probably going to hear a lot about. So just listen to that name, remember the name, because it's going to be one of those that you will hear about. Have you ever thought about when you're going to die, or whether you're going to die, or if you were going to die, what it would be like? Well, it's not really a laughing matter. It's just that this person that you're going to get to a little better acquainted with is one that has taken something that's happened to him and turned it around and made it work for him, and maybe for you and me too. My guest today thought he was just in such a situation that he was going to die after falling overboard 300 miles off the coast, the United States coast, off the North Carolina coast. Today, Ben Rowland is a 28-year-old entrepreneur who spent the last 8 years studying water-related fatalities and how to prevent them. He has patented in the United States and Canada a high-tech life-saving device called the Overboard Alert System, which can track overboard victims to drastically reduce rescue time. Ben founded a Georgia-based company to market the Overboard Alert System and develop other safety products. International navies, commercial fishing and shipping fleets, offshore oil platforms, and cruise ships are just a few of the places Ben expects to see his product in action in the next few years. Ben was lucky that fateful day in 1984, but many people are not. Internationally, thousands of people still lose their lives each day in water-related accidents, and many of those are children. And he's listed in the Who's Who of America Inventors, and he's here to talk about the future of safety, and I'd like you to help me welcome Ben Rowland. Hey, welcome to Victory Network and Vision Plus.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and tell you a little bit about what happened to me and the problems behind falling overboard and how we can stop that in the future. I think the question that's asked me the most is, how did I fall overboard? How did it happen to me?
And this is what size is this yacht?
It was a 30-foot sailboat. I was coming back from the British Virgin Islands, and I was coming to Annapolis, Maryland for new electronics. So the boat itself was not in very good repair. I'd been out at sea for 12 days. There was 4 of us on the sailboat, and we had about another 2 days to go. We were about 300 miles off the coast.
And you had just seen the movie Jaws.
Yes, I had. That is correct. And I thought about Jaws a lot over the few days of sailing. It's a scary fact to think that, you know, there are sharks underneath the boat as you sail along. Of course, every time you jump in the water, you suddenly, you know, think about those big jaws coming up towards you. But most people ask me, they say, well, it must have been bad weather, or you must have had high winds, or some type of incident like that. But it was not that case. And I really want to stress that because accidents happen in good weather. Accidents happen anytime. And really we have to find ways to acknowledge that and to always be alert to when an accident can happen. For me, it was a beautiful afternoon, ideal sailing conditions. We had stopped for about 4 hours. We had rested. We were sailing around the clock, each person taking 6-hour shifts. And after a few hours of relaxation, we lifted our sails, and I was the first person on watch. I was alone on deck. I had been for about a half hour. And at that time, I needed to relieve myself. So I walked to the back of the ship, and as I was standing there, I slipped. And it was really that simple. People say, my gosh, you know, wasn't there, again, a high wind, or did the boat jump and toss around? No, I slipped. Well, my mind made a decision while I was falling that nobody saw me, and it was hopeless. So by the time I hit the water, I was already shocked, Bonnie. I was in shock. I was paralyzed. I missed a 100-foot lifeline that we were pulling behind us just for that occasion. I was frozen. So then the worst thing happened of all. Guess what that was?
What was that?
I lost sight of the boat. I lost sight of a boat that had nobody on it in my mind. And suddenly, no matter which way I looked, there was nothing but water. My heart was pounding. Ideas of sharks running through my head. I knew we were 300 miles at least away from shore, and I'm a strong swimmer, but not that strong. Plus, I was so panicked, I was so immobilized. And this is all because my mind had made the decision that nobody saw me and it was hopeless. Well, in fact, somebody did see me. A young woman saw me out a hatch, saw me go overboard. But by the time she got on deck, she had already lost sight of me. That's how fast you move in the water. So she couldn't say to me or wave to me and let me know in any way that they knew about me. So there I was, left in the water, no boat in sight, no hope in sight. It was all over for me, I was certain. I think I really came to the place where I probably would have wanted to drown rather than be pulled down by a shark. But then everything changed. You know how it changed?
How did it change then?
I saw the boat. It came back upon me. And then suddenly my mind shifted and I had a positive attitude about it. I knew they knew about me. I had energy, I could swim. At that
How long
point,
do you think had passed? An hour and a half?
It felt like a couple of hours, but it was probably less than an hour.
At that point when you first saw the boat
coming back. Yeah, now they had actually passed me because it's very hard to find a person in the water.
I was wondering, how could they even see in an ocean?
Yeah, this is something most people don't realize or think about is, you know, when you fall in the water, really all that is above the water is your head. So it's like looking for a gallon milk jug floating in the middle of a vast ocean. And that's what it was like for them. So they passed me the first time. They came back on a reciprocal course, standard rescue procedures. You follow a reciprocal course, you turn. They did that, they passed me. They turned again and came upon me finally after trying. Well, I can't express enough what the attitude change did for me. Because suddenly I realized...
But you didn't have that attitude change until you actually saw them coming back for you.
Absolutely. That suddenly gave me hope. And that's all I needed, because hope allowed me to have energy. Hope allowed me to go past the shock that I was in. Hope allowed me to swim, allowed me to yell, to pull myself as far out of the water as I could with my arms above my head yelling for him. Whereas before, all I could do was just barely keep myself above the water.
By treading water.
Mm-hmm. So they pulled me back on the boat, and in all honesty, it was right then that I had the idea for the overboard alert system. The real advantage for the overboard alert system is twofold. One is being able to track a person in the water, to actually be able to locate them while they're in the water ongoingly and know when they fall overboard. And that's a feature of the overboard alert system. But I believe its real value is for the person in the water, because when you go overboard, if you're conscious, you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they know about you.
If you have this, like a watch on or something, however.
That's correct. Let me tell you a little bit about the overboard alert system. Well, needless to say, it's called the overboard alert system out of my own experience. Originally, it was designed for cruise ships, which is the largest number of novice passengers, and probably where the most fear exists at any one time on the water. I really wanted to give people the opportunity to go out on the water in a more comfortable manner. Well, the idea was that we put a wristband on a person. We have a monitor on board the ship. When a person goes overboard, the monitor tracks that wristband, recognizes that he's exceeded the boundaries or gone over the side of the ship, and an alarm goes off on deck. So not only does everybody on the ship hear the alarm, but the person in the water, if they're conscious, hey, they hear the alarm. The one that,
in addition to having it on their arm,
absolutely,
they hear the alarm.
They hear the alarm that I wanted to hear that day, the alarm that I never heard, the alarm that would have given me a different perspective in the water, a different level of comfort.
A hope.
Yeah, absolutely, a hope. So that was the whole thrust behind what I call the early days of the overboard alert system, and that was to give the person in the water hope that the boat knew about them and that they can locate them ongoingly.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you only had in a 30-foot boat, which is still a big good size. That's like a kind of like a large houseboat could be in our waters that are
Certainly.
in this area, and so that's a very small compared to a cruise ship, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
Or a Navy ship that would have a carrier, for instance. So yours would work for both, but how does it work? How does it work? How does it know? How does this thing on your arm know you're out of bounds?
Well, very simply, what we do is we put a monitor on board the ship. We put it on a set mode. We take one of the wristbands or the belt units and we walk the perimeter of that ship. That burns what we call a peripheral rim into the memory of the monitor. The monitor now tracks every person on that ship. So we put, we'll put a wristband on you and we'll identify you to the monitor. That number 12 is Bonnie. And then you're tracked ongoingly on that ship. Now once you exceed that peripheral ring, that boundary that's in the monitor's mind, it sends a signal and an alarm to the monitor, and the monitor then not only puts an auditory alarm, a signal out on the ship so everybody can hear it, but it also can fire life rafts off the side or stop an engine, or there's a couple other features that we're trying to improve for the system to not only work for the private sailboat, but for the commercial fleets too. Now, primarily we're working with the United States Navy right now and developing it for international navies around the world, because really that's the most number of people at sea, and I feel to start this technology, it's really the place we could probably do the most good. Matter of fact, I'd like to tell you a story that will really give you a good example of what this system can do. About 2 years ago, there was a ship, USS Nassau, in the Mediterranean, and it's there was a tractor parked on the deck, used to pull planes around. I'm sure you've seen them on the deck. Well, somebody had pulled the tractor to the side and had put the parking brake on, but had not put chocks underneath the wheels.
On the carrier.
Correct. So a little bit later, the ship made a turn and the deck angle shifted, and the tractor rolled off the deck into the water.
Now that's not a human.
That's not a human.
But it could still have some type of.
Well, the situation got worse.
Oh.
Somebody thought they saw somebody in the tractor.
Okay, I'm with you.
So they yelled, "Man overboard." Quickly a head count was done, and sure enough, there was a man missing. Well, this started about 12 hours of very detailed search patterns. There were 3 other ships in the convoy that were pulled in.
How many people were involved in this?
Oh, by this time, probably 2,000 to 3,000 people on the different ships.
That's a couple bucks that they're spending.
Absolutely. Well, as I like to say, 12 hours later, after thousands of gallons of fuel were used up, hundreds of man-hours, and probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, the person was found asleep in another person's bunk. Okay? Well, we made the point that if the overboard alert system had been on that ship and each person had a wristband on, that we could do what we call an electronic roll call, which what happens is quickly the monitor asks, "Are you there, are you there, are you there, are you there?" And it polls each person. And it determines, yes, they are on the ship, or no, they're not. So at that point, we would have been able to determine that everybody was on the ship. The tractor has gone overboard. And yes, if we had one of the tracking devices on the tractor, yeah, we could have found it too.
But that's not as important as the human being.
No,
and
yeah.
the fact that you spent that hundreds of thousands of dollars in man-hours and getting 2 other ships involved. And that would happen if you were the Coast Guard or even here on Lake Guntersville, or if it would be in Washington, the Potomac, wherever it would be the same situation. Not only would be that ship involved, but other ships would be involved too.
You're absolutely right. Our United States Coast Guard is really an overworked task force. They answer thousands of overboard and capsized incidences each year nationally. They assist in international rescue missions. They're very busy people. And I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people in the Coast Guard who've given me an insight to what they do. And they say primarily what they do is they look for something that doesn't exist, because many of the overboard situations, many of the capsize situations are false alarms. But they're out there nevertheless looking. And again, you run into the problem, if you do have a person out in the middle of the ocean, how do you find them? If you fly a plane over, have you ever tried to locate a milk jug floating on top of the water?
I know, when you're in a plane looking down, even little cars look like ants, you know, even if you're low enough on the ground, the land, to see it.
So what we did was actually give the boat the ability to react to their own overboard situation. If a person went overboard, you didn't have to call in the lifeguards, the Coast Guard. You didn't have to get outside rescue services. You should be able to take care of your own situation immediately.
Save hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely.
Alone.
Another critical area is offshore oil platforms, mostly because you're dealing with people who are on the platform long term, a large number of people, and then particularly hazardous cases when they're in the North Seas and you're dealing with temperature of the water that could be, you know, down close to freezing. In fact, when you fall in, if you don't have cardiac arrest within about the first 3 to 4 minutes, chances are you'll die by exposure within 8 to 12 minutes. So obviously time is critical right then. And obviously knowing about a person falling overboard is critical. So, you know, and the problem is you never know when it's going to happen.
What about like the airline there in Washington, where it went into the water there, and part of it was still sticking out, and, you know, and one of the biggest challenges they had was knowing who is missing and where are they missing. And they spent so much time getting frogmen and people down there diving for them to find them, and scuba divers and so forth.
Well, absolutely, Bonnie. I would like to see this product on every traveler. It would assist emergency workers endlessly, but no, we probably won't have it on travelers in the airline industry. Now, what we can have.
You mean soon, because of the fact that, are you talking about the person would resent putting something on?
Quite possibly.
I would. I think people would. I wear a Walkman. You know, I don't think I would mind putting something on if I thought there's a possibility it would help.
I don't know if it's so much the individual minding as much as the airline company minding the image that if they have a safety product, they must have a problem. I told you a little earlier.
But if all airlines had it as a ruling that they were to have it.
I would love it.
So I'd just take Congress to change that. Just a little thing.
Absolutely. Another area that we can use it in the airline industry is to track planes once they're on the ground. I'm sure you saw the news about a year ago when a couple Midwestern airplanes crashed on the ground, and it was foggy conditions, but once they land on the ground, there's really no way to track them other than visually. So we've actually done a small study that to look at the probability of putting it on aircrafts purely for when they land. When they're in the air, there are other forms of transponders and techniques for tracking them, obviously radar. But once they come below the radar level, then, you know, we like to track them on the ground, hopefully prevent other collisions like we saw last year. Another area is obviously Alzheimer's patients, which is an area that I've looked in for the last about 2 years. It's an increasing concern here in the United States, and something that I'd like to do. I'd like to participate in helping. I can't imagine what it must be like to worry about your parents wandering out unnoticed.
Well, you know, that actually happened to my dad. He had died of Alzheimer's, and I can remember he got out of the house and he was walking down the highway, a highway, which my parents lived on a highway out in the country, but it was a highway. And a neighbor, you know, in the country, a lot of people know, so a neighbor found him, knew who he was, and brought him home. But what if he'd fallen down and the driver of the vehicle had not seen him? Many things, you know. What if he'd gotten a neighbor that didn't know him? I mean, a traveler coming through, and he couldn't tell him where he was from.
Absolutely. And much like me in the water, they're in a position where they can't do anything for themselves.
That's true.
They cannot help themselves. Same as when I was in the water. I became intensely aware of the fact that I could not help myself. I had to be saved. And, you know, of course, now I see that any device that can assist in helping a person who cannot assist in themselves is needed. So Alzheimer's patients is an area that you can expect to see this type of tracking device in the next few years. Also children, you know, the sad fact is still in the United States over 200,000 children are lost or abducted each year. And that is a number I plan on doing something about. That is something we can do something about. That is a number we can change. So really there are many areas, and as I said, I'd like to see this eventually a standard piece of everybody's traveling equipment, like a compass and a map.
Well, you know, Ben, I'd like to, there's so many questions that have gone on in my mind as we talked about the obstacles you've gone through, and you being the inventor and the founder and running the program yourself. And I know, though, your dad has owned his own business for 20 years, and we want to hear about that if possible, and we can't hear all of that. I'd like to do another program, so if people would like to watch, next week we're going to continue with some questions maybe you'd like. If you have an idea that you would like to pursue, how do you go about getting the money to do it? How do you go about getting the patents to do it? How do you go about getting the people to favor to look at your project, your patent? So I'd like to ask Ben a lot of those questions. He, as a young entrepreneur, has been able to answer those. If he's put such intensity into this, then I certainly want you to watch how that has come about. And we're just not going to have time to answer those questions right now, but we will do that in next week's program. So if you will stay tuned and tune us in again. And by the way, if you'd like to have a copy of these, I'm sure Victory Network will allow us to have those. And Ben, would it be all right if people had a copy of these videotapes?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so they can. They actually can get them from, if it's all right with you, a donation to Victory Network, and they could have these for you. If you would like to get in touch with Ben Rowland, how could we do that? I think we're going to have it on the screen, but would you go over it right now, how people could get in touch with you?
Certainly, Bonnie. I'm very interested in meeting anybody who, number one, has been involved with an overboard or capsize incident. I have an ongoing study that hopefully in the next 2 years will produce a paper into the industry that will show some new trends that I've discovered in the last 8 years of studying marine fatalities.
So in the last minute, tell us how we can,
how to get in touch with me.
In addition to what it
you can call me directly at 202-298-8911, or if you prefer, you can write me at 5010 Wisconsin Avenue, Suite 118, Washington, D.C. 20016.
And we do have that on the screen if you'd like to get that, or if you could possibly, maybe I shouldn't overload Patty Allen by saying call Victory Networks and ask her. But no, she's shaking her head no. Try to get it off the screen. But if you want to, that'd be a last resort. Patty would be happy to do that, I'm sure. But we're so happy that you joined us, and you too, Ben Rowland. It's just wonderful.
Thank you, Bonnie.
To have you here. We want to find out a little bit more about how we can actually go into business or get an idea, or if we have an idea, how to pursue that. And along with Ben Rowland, I'm Bonnie Libhart, and bless your heart for watching.
Praise, His presence with thanksgiving in your heart. Your voices raised, your voices raised.